Good evening and welcome to the Collectives Pack virtual speaker series, Our Collective Power. We're going to get in a short little while, so give us about 3 more minutes, but we are really excited to have you joining us tonight for our third edition of Something to Say. Good evening again, and thank you so much for joining the Collective Pack. This is our 9th event in our Collective Pack, our Collective Power virtual speaker series. Again, tonight, the South has something to say once again. This year in 2020, we are seeing a transformational year for how we view the South. As far as electoral politics go. We know that South Carolina, Georgia, Florida are all going to be pivotal in deciding how this election goes, both at a national level, but also the future of democratic politics in the South. So we have some outstanding candidates with us tonight. We know that in 2018, Georgia and Florida came also close to turning blue, but they've carried over that momentum into 2020. In South Carolina, what we're seeing with Jaime Harrison and his run for Senate and the cascading effect that it is going to have on all of South Carolina's candidates is just simply remarkable. Thank you again for joining us tonight. First, I'm going to bring up Moe Brown. He is a candidate for U.S. Congress in South Carolina's 5th Congressional District. Next, we have Pasha Baker, who is running for Florida House District 28. Ebony Carter is running for Georgia House District 110, and Matielyn Jones, a personal friend of mine who is running for the Georgia State Senate in State Senate District 45. So how's everybody doing tonight? You hanging in there? 21 days out?
Very good. Here we go.
Ready to get it on November
21
3rd.
days out.
Let's go.
21 days. And it's going fast.
Absolutely.
So look, let's just jump right into this. We've all heard the phrase, the South has something to say. Andre 3000 made it a coin phrase. But when we're thinking about politics, and especially in a year like this, when you hear that phrase, the South has something to say, and you think about your candidacy, but also the direction that your states in the South is headed in, what does that phrase mean to you? And we'll start with Moe.
Well, Chris, thank you for having us on tonight, and it's great to be with all of you as well. It is an amazing time in our country, as we all know, and it's time for us to speak up and say what we believe our country reflects. So when I hear the South has something to say, it's our history. You know, the South has always had something to say, good, bad, or indifferent. But the decisions that we make this time, it's going to be it's going to be a reflection of what history we decide to write. And so for me, me saying something for the South is stepping up and running for Congress, because that's where the fight is at the tables where policies are being set. And too often our communities have been left out of those conversations because we haven't been represented in those conversations. But what I think people got to understand that in the South, most people down here are good, decent folks. And if you live by the creed of do unto others as they will do unto you, you generally are pretty good. And I think folks down here are tired of the bickering back and forth between both parties, and they want to see real solutions happen on behalf of the American people. And I think the South is going to show up big and show its goodness, show its decency, and flip a lot of states down here in the South blue.
Matielyn, how about you? Was the South have something to mean to you?
Well, the South has something to say means y'all are about to hear something you ain't heard before. Like y'all need to listen up. We're about to show you what we're made of. We're about to show you who we are, dispel who we're not. And I think, being in the birthplace of the civil rights movement and being in this area, knowing that this is the part of the country that has always pushed the country forward, I think is a really great thing. And so I think when I hear the South has something to say, I just think that, young people who are full of great ideas, full of passion, full of energy, and who really want this Constitution to be real and the words in this Constitution to be real for everybody here. We are rising up. We're running for office. We're coming for these seats. We are bringing great candidates to the table. We're including people. And it just means you better get ready, because here we go. Let's go.
Speak on it, Ms. Jones.
Come on now. Come on, Church early on this one. Ebony, was the South have something to say mean to you?
So, like Matielyn said, this is a time where we're ready to show who we really are. For so long, we have been a Republican stronghold, and really people just kind of played us to the side. Like, we already know Georgia's going to the Republicans. We already know South Carolina's going to the Republicans. We already know Florida's going to the Republicans. But I think now it's like we are ready to say, listen, y'all. We're ready for some change. We're ready to show y'all that we can do better, not only for ourselves and our communities, but the greater communities of each of our states. And so for me, in my district, there hasn't been a Democrat who's even run since 2014. So this is really just a time where we're like, okay, y'all, this is the time, and let's capitalize on this. We see what's going on, and we see how we can do better. So let's do it. Let's get it done. And I think that as a young person running for office, especially as a young Black woman, I feel like we, especially in Georgia, we're really just taking that tide and we're running with it. So we want to say that we're ready for some change, and we're going to do it.
Pasha, bring us on.
Yeah, greetings from Florida. And I am in Sanford, Florida, where my family has resided for about 3 generations. So deep here in Sanford and throughout Seminole County. As you know, we had the president of the country here yesterday that had his rally here in Sanford. But we see the dynamic changing. As Ebony said, and Moe said, and Matielyn said, we see the dynamic changing in the South. And we, as Black Americans, are breaking barriers through politics to advocate for change in policy, while we got our brothers and sisters out there pushing on the streets to advocate for us through marches, through different ways of advocacy, to make sure that we're holding everybody accountable while we're in these positions. So we're both working together to bridge these bridges. But for the South, and specifically here in Florida, where I am, I'm running for State House District 28. There are 3 legislative seats within Seminole County: District 28, District 29, and the entire Senate district. There has never been a Black in Seminoles County's 107-year history for any of those seats. We talk about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The will of the people here in Florida said to let people vote, whether they made a mistake in life or not. People are tired of this because now you're denying the will of the people. That's what people are tired of, and people are seeking change. And we see change. And like you said, I read your your briefing that you sent to all of us, and you're right. We are watching history right before our eyes with all of these races. And then as well, I would be the first woman in this seat ever. Women have had the right to vote since 100 years this year, but not Black women. We got it sometime later. And then the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But we're still fighting for the same things. We're still breaking down those barriers. So this is where change comes in, and this is where history is made with us.
Yeah. So we've already seen, and before I get to the one-on-one questions, we've been seeing just abnormal voter turnout. And it's weird that I have to use the term abnormal when we talk about voter turnout. You would think it's something that we make easy and everybody is enthusiastic about, but we know that's not the case. So a lot of your states have already begun with early voting, and particularly, I have to go to Georgia because I think a lot of us saw the images. But one thing I saw on the Facebook post that was amazing to me was it wasn't that it was oppression necessarily, but it was that much enthusiasm for people to actually want to come out and vote this year. And so just walking around the country already, and this question goes to everybody, how does it have you feeling about this election and just the people realizing the sense of particularly young people being motivated to get to the polls early, even amongst a pandemic right now? We'll start with Matielyn.
So, when I saw the lines yesterday, it's bittersweet, right? Because I was so encouraged by the turnout. I was like, oh my goodness. And I just want to give a high five to everybody who communicated the message that early voting started yesterday, because the message was clearly heard that early voting started yesterday. And so, there's a part of me that was like beaming on the inside, like, oh my goodness, yes, the people heard, the people are here, the people are out. But to actually see the line and recognize and realize, like, this is so obnoxious and ridiculous on a, government service or a government administration level that it's just, it's sad. And so it's like, it's bittersweet. The enthusiasm is warmed my heart, but the lines are just there. It's just not okay. Mm-hmm. And so I think I think people are faced with the reality, especially if they waited in the long lines yesterday, of like, who you elect matters, mm-hmm. because who they put in charge matters. And if people care enough to make this a simpler process, or if people have the political will to make this a simpler process, they will. But if they don't care enough, or they don't have the political will, or they don't have the resources, which are determined by the legislatures, then this is what you end up with. So I'm torn. Like, the teacher in me was elated, but the citizen running for office in me was like, this has to change. This is not okay.
Ebony.
So I will reiterate a few of those points. I actually went to go vote today, but yesterday the lines were ridiculous. As I told you guys earlier today, in my county, I live in Henry County, where McDonough is, which is where I live. It's a very large part of my district. In McDonough, or in Henry County, there are about 225,000 people who live here right now. And we only have 2 polling stations open for our entire county to get all those people in to vote. So yesterday, the wait time in my county were about 8 hours. One of our representatives, actually, Representative Sandra Scott, she waited, she said, from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. She was there that long, and she called me and was like, yeah, I just now got out of the line. And it was very exciting to see the lines and see the enthusiasm, like you said, Matielyn. The people clearly wanted to be there. They wanted to make their voices heard, but it was very disheartening having to see them stand in those lines for so long. Sometimes in many parts of Georgia, they were waiting far longer than the polling station was open. There were people out there, it was 8:30, 9 o'clock, they were still waiting to vote. And today I went to go vote and it took me 2 hours. I got there around 2:45 and I left. I got home at like 5:14. I was running like, gotta get on this call. And I knew I had to be here, but it was like, no, I need to vote today because I'm not gonna have time to do it in the next 3 weeks. I have to get it done. So yes, it's so exciting to see the numbers. Yesterday, at the end of the day, over 500,000 people had voted in Georgia. Like, that is crazy. And in the day alone, 130,000 people had voted. That is wild. That is unlike anything we've ever seen in Georgia. So yes, it's exciting, but we have to do better. And like you said, that's going to be better legislators, better people in office who are going to really care about making sure people have what they need, equity. Mm-hmm. That's it. I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Well, how is voting numbers around the country making you feel right now? I think you're on mute, Mo.
The dreaded mute button. It gets me every Zoom conference, I swear. I would say, like everyone is saying, it is exciting, but it's what's required. We've seen protests throughout the country all year, for the most part, talking about the social changes that we need to see, the criminal justice changes we need to see, and honestly, the social economic changes that we need to see in this country. All that has been highlighted even more in depthly due to the crises that we're facing on so many fronts, specifically coming from the COVID crisis. So I think this particular year, you got so many amazing candidates up and down the ballot that's running for office because everyone is feeling the same energy. Prior to even COVID hitting, we knew we needed to reset this country to get us back on track to move towards that more perfect union. And so I think the energy that you've seen is a continuation of our political leaders being ineffective at keeping us safe, healthy, giving us opportunity to have our inputs be matched by the outputs that's the American promise, and all of that coalescing in one election cycle. I think you feel the energy of everyone saying that we must act right now to literally save our democracy. Because Donald Trump is reelected, the GOP, who have allowed him to go unchecked and break the law over and over and over again, and at the same time say that he is the rule of law president, that is just cutting at the fabric of a fundamental foundation of this country. And if we don't correct it in this cycle where we've been failed by the senators of this country, then we will lose our country as we know it. And it will be a different iteration of America that we would not be able to recognize. So I think people are understanding that more and more and more as this administration shows neglect to our lives as Americans, and thus those lines are out the door. And the tragedy of it all is the reason why you should be there even more. And what I like to say all the time is when the emotion fades, the discipline kicks in. And that discipline right now is staying in those lines, making sure that your voice is counted. You having a great voting plan in place. Understand that you will be waiting and have a friend, have a family member that's there with you, comfortable clothes. Make a plan because your voice must be heard through your vote this year. 1 million people didn't vote in 2016. That is completely unacceptable. And if we have a repeat of that, again, we will lose our democracy. So too much is at stake. So it's exciting to see people understanding that we got to keep that momentum going to November 3rd. And I think we'll have a great result because of it.
Okay, now, Pasha, how does this early voting that we've been seeing around the country so far make you feel?
It makes me feel great. It makes me feel great. It's always good to see people engaged in the process, but to hear more and more rhetoric around it, especially coming from Black and brown people, that's the most important to me as well, because not all the time have we been engaged in the process. It was great during 2008 and 2012 during President Obama. It was exciting to see Andrew Gillum and leader Abrams run as gubernatorial candidates to break those barriers. But I think now people had gotten complacent as well. And they got complacent within the system. And they thought it couldn't get worse. And they thought it couldn't get better. They thought everything could stay the same. But now after we see 200,000+ Americans that have lost their lives. And those aren't just numbers in our community. Those are, that's my cousin's dad that passed away of COVID-19. That's my mother's 3 classmates that passed away of COVID-19. We see a failed leadership at all directions. Yes, we see the stock market go up, but we see a minimum wage that has never increased this or caught up with inflation. Or we see people on the front lines, the workers without proper benefits to even deal with the crisis or work. We see schools shut down. People thought that couldn't happen. Now you see a Supreme Court that's getting ready to challenge majority of the laws in the nation. And a lot of the rights that we had will be taken away, depending on that vote. So I think it's great that people have gotten engaged, but they also know the power of their vote, and that their vote is that physical representation of their ideals, of how we should govern ourselves. And I'm happy that so many people and you, the collective, are doing a panel like this and looking at the color, because government needs to look like the people that it governs at the end of the day. And a lot of times in the South, that has never happened. We have never been represented at all the levels, whether it be city, whether it be county, whether it be school board, or at that state level. So I'm happy we're getting engaged on both sides, running for office and running great campaigns to give people a run for their money, and coming up with those dollars to make sure we are able to compete. And then on the other side, having people to vote for us and stand in those lines. That's why I feel that this is the year of change, and you feel it in the air. As we're all Southerners. We have those country sayings. Things have to change. Nothing stays the same forever.
Absolutely. Now, Mo, you happen to be, I think, the second candidate that I talked to when I started working at the collective. So I feel like we really go back here. And so you got a really unique story, like college football player, but then this huge economic advocate. And so when we look at South Carolina, we know South Carolina, like a lot of places, but especially in South Carolina, you guys were hit when it came to unemployment once the pandemic hit. And a lot of those levels still haven't returned back to pre-pandemic levels. So for you, being huge on economic development and job opportunity, what do you plan on doing when you get to Congress? Because I believe in speaking things into existence. So Congressman Moe Brown, what do you plan on doing when you get to Congress to help those South Carolinians that have suffered through COVID and just overall?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question, and that is the question of our time right now. The reality of it is that we got to get the health crisis under control before we get the economic crisis under control. Those things are directly linked together. People are literally sick or have the threat to get sick. We can't have our places of business open. So we must first get COVID-19 to a position where we can open our businesses up to best as possible to the normal it was before, but create the new normal of retrofitting these buildings, making sure that we have all the PPE that's needed to have social interaction in a safe way. We got to do that before we do anything on the front of bringing these jobs back. And the best way to do it is to get this bill passed through the Senate right now that the House passed here last week, the HEROES Act. We know that going into the winter months that our retail, particularly our restaurants, who has been thriving or surviving, I should say, from outdoor businesses. But as we go into the winter months where you cannot have the patios open, that's going to be a struggle for them to be able to do business. So how are we giving them money? One, that's forgivable loans that they can keep their doors open and keep payroll going so that we can make sure that people have a roof over their head and landlords are getting money as well. That all comes from the bill. So we must continue to stimulate our economy as we're dealing with this health crisis. And if we get disciplined enough to get through it, to bring down that community transmission transmission rate, so that we can start opening up our doors even more. That's where we're going to start seeing the growth. And I think in that unique area, we got to pull back all the layers and look at our whole education system and understand how we can start using community-centric education to start training our students to be able to recruit industries that matches up with the skill sets that, one, is currently there, or two, that we're going to build to make sure that these industries are employing all Americans as possible. So it's a lot of work that we have to do, but first off, we got to get COVID under control. We must stimulate our economy and then be innovative in how we're bringing jobs back to the Americans and people here in South Carolina.
Mo, I feel like you were in my head because you queued up my next question for me when I'm going over to Matielyn, but you hit on a major point, especially with education, which we know has been drastically affected with COVID-19. But Matielyn, you're somebody that has been a huge advocate when it comes to education. You've been a teacher, you've been a faculty advisor, you've been a charter school administrator, and all in all, people's life. Heck, I met you at a Young Black Dems event when I was president up in Ohio, but it just speaks involved when it comes to engaging youth. So for you, and speaking about your passion for education, when you get to the State House in Georgia, what do you see your role as being in helping the education system in Georgia, and maybe even inspiring other legislators around the country that want to work on making our education system better for us?
Yeah, I think, so Mo did say a bunch of stuff. I took some notes. I like what you said, because I remember that. I'm going to bookmark that. But I think the main thing, my number one priority with education, is to elevate teacher voice in decision making. Because as a former educator, we are responsible for carrying out the vision, and we're caught in the middle, often between the community and the administration. We don't have supports to keep us from being fired if the administrators don't like what we say. We don't have the opportunity to speak to how things get done. We're just expected to do it. And I think it's very sad to me, specifically in this situation with coronavirus, that our teachers, at least in my school district, were not given a choice as to whether or not they want to go back, whether or not they think they should go back. And they are all, many of them are parents and also have, medical and health conditions, and we didn't give them the choice. Mm-hmm. And so I think anytime we make big decisions, our teachers should be at the table, because I think they are the closest to the kids. I mean, it seems like it would be so simple. And so I would like to work on some kind of statewide initiative to bring teachers into the decision-making process in a formal way that protects them from retaliation from their school districts, but allows them the opportunity to speak to some things and some decisions before they are made, in a way that's meaningful to them, and to really bring them to the table about how we can do that across the state. My other priority in education is really to connect with the state superintendent and make our civic education more robust. I think part of the challenge or the heartache that I found as a social studies teacher is that I would get seniors who didn't know the difference between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And I'm like, how were you in school for all this time and you don't know the difference? And so there's plenty of kids who they don't understand the connection to the power, like Pasha said, the power they have in their vote, because it hasn't been reinforced in school. And so it should actually be formalized in school and reinforced at home. But right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of kids, especially our kids, if they have parents and grandparents who engage them in the process, then they become engaged in the political process. But it's not necessarily reinforced in school. It's just a check mark. They did this chapter, they read this, they took this quiz, but it didn't really get into it wasn't ingrained in them that this is your civic responsibility as a citizen. And so what I really would like to see is a more robust civics in our social studies curriculum. And I would partner with the state superintendent, bring some teachers to the table on how we can start having our babies voting in kindergarten. I would really love for there to be an election day in every, statewide, in the school year, just like they have like these mock trial days and these science days and whatever. I would really love for there to be an election day from kindergarten all the way through, so that by the time they're actually seniors and can register to vote at 17 and a half, that this is normal to them. They know that once a year they vote, because elections happen every year. Like, they're not every 2 years or 4 years. Elections happen every year. And so I would really like to see that being formalized into our state social studies curriculum. And so those are my two priorities on that area. And then I just want to add I love what Moe said about, he talked about skills and interests and matching that with the business community needs. And I think being innovative in that way and making the space in the schools to actually figure out what are the kids' skills and interests. Like, that is the development piece that has to start happening in the school. So we're not just wasting 13 years of content-driven curriculum and not actually investing in, as y'all know, the whole child, and really trying to figure out who is this child in front of me and how can I cultivate them and cultivate what they're already interested in and build on that to prepare them for those college decisions and build on that to prepare them for our actual needs in the workplace in Georgia, so that when they graduate, they're actually meeting a need in Georgia and not wanting or needing to take their skill somewhere else and go build somewhere else. So we want to try to keep our talent in-house, but that can also be a partnership early on, where we really start to try to take the time to figure out who is the child in front of me, not just what do they know about this subject.
Can I add one thing?
Go ahead, Mo.
That was fantastic, Matielyn. You really catch on a lot of things that I speak on very specifically. But ultimately, what we have to accomplish through this whole process is really just re-engaging our community, in the sense that we can move this whole community together. If we just sit down, have conversation with our business leaders, our economic development leaders, our education leaders, our training issue leaders, and say, what are we trying to accomplish? And once we establish the vision for a region through the whole community, then we can go out and recruit the companies that we want to see in those communities. But we also have an opportunity to build those companies. If you look at how you can train someone and you take them to trades and they learn how to become a carpenter, a machinist, a welder, whatever you want to put there, they have a skill set that is transferable to so many different industries at that point in time, to where they can start creating their own small businesses. And then government on our side, as we putting out contracts to procure whatever thing that we need to get done, we can put those minority requirements that's in there, but cut those contracts in a way that allow a company like me, say I'm starting off as a welder, to take a $5,000 contract. Then, as I go through that process, do that $5,000 of work, then I can do a $10,000, then graduate to a $50,000, to a $100,000. And what you end up creating is a small business entrepreneur community that has skill sets that's going to recruit those companies that want to see those as well. So all these things are interconnected, and if we play connecting dots through education, infrastructure, job creation, healthcare, we're going to be better off for it. So Matielyn, thanks for bringing that all together, but I wanted to add a little bit more color because I think it's such an important conversation, and the more of us that's doing it, the better chance we're going to have to push it forward.
Well,
I'm sorry, like I just gotta say this one thing, Chris, real quick. And then we have to elect people with the political will to commit to the things that you just talked about, which is why the collective PAC is so important, because we're going back to political will, okay?
Right.
Look. So our saying, obviously, to change the law, we have to change the lawmakers. But I think everybody is, Mo, Matielyn, y'all hit on a major point. When you look at education, it's a full circle thing. It is something that I think a lot of us overlook, that is so interconnected to everything. I think, Matielyn, when you're talking about teachers and going back in the pandemic, and the fact that a lot of these decisions were made, you weren't thinking about the children. You definitely weren't thinking about the teachers that got to teach. And if anybody had any question, I'm a parent myself. If you had any undervalue of what your teachers actually do, you definitely felt it during this pandemic, and why we have to pay our educators a lot more than what they're paid right now, because they're literally cultivating the minds for the next generation and how things are going. And then, Mo, you once again, you brought up a segue into my next question that I'm kicking it over to Ebony, which is talking about healthcare. And so we saw in Georgia this past year, lawmakers failed to submit a waiver that would have helped over 100,000, hundreds of thousands of people actually be insured under Medicaid. And so currently you 0.3 million Georgians that are uninsured. So for you, as a young elected official about to be on her way House, because once again, we're going to speak this into existence. So when I come to you and speak to you as the next state rep or state senator, I need y'all to embrace this during this conversation. So as you're on your way in, because we're going to claim your success in November, what do you feel like that you can do to effectively address getting more of these people insured, which we know healthcare, it should never even be a question about somebody having to be uninsured. You should never have to walk into a hospital and be afraid to actually go up to the front desk because you're worried about how you're going to pay for the bill. But what would you do as a legislator to help get so many of these Georgians insured?
So like you said, and like you both said, Moe and Matielyn, this all ties together. And I want to say, Moe, you said something about job security. Well, one thing we saw, of course, in Georgia, but across the country, is that healthcare is tied to our jobs. Mm-hmm. When you lose your job, you lose your healthcare. So first of all, let's make sure we can re-expand our healthcare system. So for me, that's expanding Medicare. This year alone, in the 2021 fiscal year budget, I want to say at least 24,000. No, I take that back. 24 million. Sorry, I misspoke. $24 million were cut from our healthcare budget here in Georgia. And they also cut from our educational budget, but that's a whole other story. And it's in the middle of a pandemic. So you see that people need healthcare. You see that their needs are prevalent. And at this point, they're pushing on them. They're deciding whether they're going to pay their medical bills or pay their rent or buy food. And you're not helping them with any of those things. So first of all, we should expand the system that's already been put in place by our federal and state government to help the people on the ground. And I would expand Medicare as soon as possible. Medicaid, Medicare is so integral. I actually have a 1-year-old. She's 1.5. And so I'm 25. And of course, I'm still on mother's healthcare. I've never been on my own healthcare because I have never found a job that gave me healthcare that I could afford. Because our state does not use the money they get from our federal government to fully fund the system we have in place to help the majority of us. And if we would just expand our healthcare system, we would help a lot more people. This pandemic showed us that our healthcare system, our job security systems, our educational systems are faulty. They're falling apart. And if we don't do something now to change that and to foster better for the people, again, not in only our state in Georgia, but across the country, we're going to fail a lot of people. We've already failed over 200,000 people in this country. And it's like, at this point, if you decide not to do something to help the people who are still here, then you are choosing to just leave them by the wayside. And I would not do that. That's not my goal. So I think we should at the very least, expand our Medicaid, Medicare system here in Georgia. But also just make sure that people can afford their premiums, their copay. Make sure that people have, again, what they need. We have ridiculous insurance rates here in Georgia. They're very high. And that shows in our healthcare system. For mental health, copay can be anywhere from $30 to $300. I had medication at one time that I paid $10 for because I had insurance. But if I was to buy it every month without my insurance, it was $1,100 a month.
Wow.
So if you don't have insurance, that is medication that is vital to you. And not just me, if you have diabetes, if you have high blood pressure, if you have any number of healthcare or pre-existing conditions, as they call them, and you don't have healthcare, if you don't have insurance, you are, I almost cursed. Let me bring it back. You're going to be hurt. That's going to hurt you in the long run. It's not going to hurt just you. It's going to hurt your family. And what we need now is really someone who's going to bolster that system. So expanding Medicaid, Medicare is definitely first on my list of things to do when I get into that state house.
So, Pasha, coming over to you and staying on the conversation of healthcare, and I hate to pick on Florida, but we have seen some significant spikes, if anywhere in the country, Florida being one of the highest places when we're talking about
COVID-19. We wide open down here.
From pushing to keep the schools open,
no man,
just all of it. And so, what can you do as a legislator? Obviously, you're coming in later, clean up, and we're trying to pick people's lives back up. But what can you do while you're campaigning? But then, of course, get to the state legislator to correct and try to piece people's lives back together that were significantly affected by COVID-19, whether or not it's their job security or just overall. Now, a lot of people now have a pre-existing condition. What can you do as a state legislator to help piece people's lives back together?
I think many of our Republican governors around the South, including Georgia, we are in the same situation where they did not accept Medicaid and to expand and send back those federal dollars. But one way to rebuild our economy and build back better is to not only accept that Medicaid, to ensure those 800,000 of our most vulnerable neighbors and Floridians, but how many jobs would that 800,000 create? That $14 billion that comes back into the state of Florida. So not only, because healthcare is related to everything, healthcare is related to the environment, healthcare is directly related to the economy. So we ensure these 800,000 people, how many more jobs can we create with that insurance? Because somebody has to take care of them. That money's going to circulate somewhere. So that's one of the ways that we can rebuild back better. Two, I don't think this pandemic is going anywhere soon. So we all would be sworn in around about January 2021. They do not expect to have or a full cure for everyone, because your most vulnerable would get it first, not until mid-2021. So the first thing we would do is enact a mask mandate for everyone. And there has been a lot of talk about not wearing masks. People said that it violated their rights. However, I'm not very clear on that argument, because when I get into my car, I have a dinging seatbelt that says you have to wear your seatbelt. That's government regulated. When I go out to eat, there are different permits and regulations that a restaurant has had to have before I could eat there. So there's all types of different regulations. And this one is just a public health recommendation. As we've all went into stores that said no shirt, no shoes, no service. That's publicly mandated. So that's two things I would do. One is accept Medicaid and Medicare. Two is to enact a statewide mask mandate. Third, we have to fix our unemployment system. Here in the state of Florida, we have an broken unemployment system with millions that still have not received unemployment since the pandemic started. So that would be the first as well. And to expand upon the number of weeks, as well as the pay for unemployment here in the state of Florida is $250 a week. No one can live off of $250 a week. The system was designed to fail. We know that, but now we have to fix it. And those are the things that we can do now to build back better, but also to ensure that all Floridians are safe in the state of Florida, in which currently they're not now.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh.
Miss Pasha, she just took me there, because she just said something about unemployment and how much you get paid for unemployment. And something you said really stuck with me, how the unemployment in your state is $250 a month.
No, a week. Yeah.
Or a week, you said, a week. in Georgia, our minimum wage is still $5.15
an hour.
It's an hour, yes, ma'am. It's $5.15 an hour. So our national unemployment has surpassed our state unemployment. So at this point, there is no like you will get this much for unemployment. You get however much you get, whether it's $100 a week or whatever you get from your job. If you have a 1099, you have to apply for unemployment, get denied, and then apply again for a PU. It's like pandemic unemployment assistance.
For the federal aid.
And people are still waiting on that to this day. And it is sad. And I feel like that would be that's just the number 2 for me. I know you didn't ask me that question, but that unemployment is so crazy to me, because I have people ask me daily, how do I get my unemployment? How can I apply for unemployment? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Who do I call? They're not answering my calls. What do I do now? And again, people are deciding whether they're going to feed their kids, pay their rent, or go to the doctor. And somewhere something is falling between the cracks. And you just said that, and it
definitely
was like,
in both states, Florida and Georgia, and throughout the South, it was designed to fail. And it was
absolutely
designed to fail for people that look like you and me, and designed to fail to make sure that the poor stayed poor and kept working, and still weren't able to get to the wages and stuff that they needed. And they were able to depend on the government.
But it's not just Georgia and Florida. We're seeing this all over in a broken system.
That's right.
If there's anything, and it's so unfortunate, and I hate to use the word, but COVID-19 has really just exposed the many flaws that we have in our government right now, and how our government is set up to actually support those that are the most vulnerable. And Pasha, you were just it the most, but I think about, people that have a minimum wage job, those young people that are just fresh out of college, that you really cannot afford not to be working at this time. And so you hope maybe you live in a state that their unemployment benefits are decent. But if you don't live in a state, you can't rely on a stimulus check at this point, because we've already been told it's going to be held for ransom, which just the idea of it, and how many people, when all of you get in office, no matter what level you're at, but Moe at Congress, Pasha, Matielyn, Ebony at the state legislature, we have a real repair job that we're going to have to do. And it's not just about fixing people's lives, but it's also restoring trust that government is actually going to have your back and take care of you in these instances. So I don't want to stay on the soapbox too long. I know we're getting late into the hour, so I want to get to a couple of rapid fire questions for you guys. But this has been an amazing conversation, but I just recalled that we never went into what inspired you to run in the first place. That is a major question. So if you could let our audiences know what inspired you to run for office when you did. And we'll start with Ebony.
Okay, so many things inspired me to run for office, but I always like to say I never intended to run for office, especially not this year. I'm only 25. I turned 25 in March. I'm like 25 and a half. I just graduated from college literally last year. I'm getting my master's right now. I'm in grad school. I have a 1.5-year-old. I am tired. This is not something I intended to do. This was not an ambition of mine, but I knew that somebody needed to run. Like I said earlier, no one has run as a Democrat for this seat since 2014, and a Democrat has not won this seat since 2001. A Black person has never been in this seat. A woman has never been in this seat. So I'll be the first woman, the first Black person, and the first Black woman, all wrapped into one. So what I realized is that we really just needed someone, first of all, to run, because it's been a Republican-held seat for 20 years. But also we needed someone who cared about us and who could relate to the majority of us. Like, I'm a single mom. I'm a minority. I'm a college student who's looking for work. I actually am not working right now. I am unemployed because of this COVID-19 crisis. My daughter got pneumonia in March, and my job was like, well, sis, sorry about your kid, but you're not doing the work that we need you to do. We gotta let you go. And I can feel that pain that other people can feel. I have not received unemployment, never received a stimulus check because I was a college student last year. So I am living on a hope and a prayer and the grace of God, to be honest. I live with my mom and my daughter. So like, luckily I had money saved and my mother loved me enough to, you know, put up with me. But I realized that even before this crisis, I realized that this was a year that was going to be different. I felt that in my heart. Call it intuition, but I knew that this year was going to be pivotal to our democracy. And I said to myself, well, if no one's going to run for this seat, I've lived in this city. I've lived in McDonough, Georgia since I was 7. So that's 2002. I went to elementary, middle, and high school here. I graduated from college and came back. And now I'm here raising my own kid. And I just was like, well, I guess if no one's going to do it, I can try. Didn't think it would go this well. Didn't even think I'd get past the primary. I thought someone was going to run against me in the primary. And I was going to be like, okay, well, I'll help you with your campaign. But again, I feel like this was something I was called to do. I feel like when God is telling you to do something and you go against it, eventually you get there anyway. Mm-hmm. So here I am. And I just felt like, again, we just needed someone who cared about us, who cared enough to ask us what we needed and who could relate. You know, for the last at least 10 years, the person who's been in this seat, he is a generational someone who has lived in this city, in this county for generations. He works for a law firm that his grandfather, I believe, created in the 20s, or his father created in the 20s. And our state senator also works at that same law firm. We have this old boys club mentality here in Henry County and the rest of my district, where the people in power want to keep that power, but they're not doing anything to keep their power. They're not doing anything for the people who live here, the majority of us. They're doing something to line their pockets and their friends' pockets, but they're not helping the majority of us. And we see that now. Like y'all said, 2020 really like cracked the doors open. They was like, oh, this is what y'all had going on. Okay, well now we see you did your thing. You had your time, but now it's time for you to go. It's time for us to have true positive change, not just for my family or my community, for the entire community of the district of 110 here in Georgia, but also the entire Georgia community. We need better. And I was like, well, if no one else is going to try, I guess I can do it myself. You know, as Black women, Miss Matielyn and Miss Pasha, you know, one thing my mom has always said is, well, if you're not going to do it, I'll get it done. Like, if it needs to get done, okay, I can get it done. And I said to myself, well, if no one runs for this seat, I'll do it. Even if I don't win, at least we have a choice in who's going to represent us. So
come on now. Come on, step up. Miss Matielyn.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. So listen, okay, 2 things. So I'm almost opposite of Ebony in that way, because I've always wanted to run for office. I always have been fascinated by the Constitution. I've always been a process person. So I love the process of change in government. And so like, I love it. I love the idea of a legislative body because it's relational, it's collaborative. Like you really have to get aligned on principle. And so I've always wanted to run. But again, like what actually got me from thinking to doing was going to the Collective PAC training last year in South Carolina with Jessica Byrd. Y'all, Jessica Byrd was on my vision board 5 years ago when I lived in Virginia. And so when I actually saw her in person that day, not knowing she was going to be my instructor, like I knew in that moment last April that like literally God brought her in front of me to be like, what are you waiting for? Like, everything you need to be successful in this space is in this room. That's what she opened the program with. And so it was like, I came home, I made the decision, I decided to run. And the reason why I'm running is because I want to see more compassion in politics. And I want to see more progressive people of faith stepping up to serve as elected officials. In 2016, we saw conservative people of faith overwhelmingly vote for our current administration. And for me, there not being any balance in the conversation about what faith in public life looks like was not acceptable to me. And so I feel like there's a lot of people of faith who are motivated to serve, who are the helpers, who are the healers, who are the ones who want to give and who are generous in spirit. But we're not vocal about it. We just are very demonstrative in how we show up. And so I just felt like it was really important to try to bring some balance to the conversation about what faith in public life can look like. And I also think that as a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, our party is inclusive of people of all faith and no faith. And so I thought it was really important to have people who are really actually trying to build on common ground, because one of the beauties of diversity, equity, inclusion, which is also my professional work, is that you really are trying to figure out how this can all work together, how you can still show up as your full self and respect the full selves that other people are. And so that's motivated me to try to bring some balance. And in this current seat, it ran uncontested for the last for almost 20 years. And 2 years ago, a lady put her name on the ballot as a Democrat, and she earned 42% of the vote with barely campaigning and barely raising money on purpose. She was just like, I just don't want this lady to run unopposed for another year. And so the work that I'm doing right now, like, there's gaps in the Georgia history, but I think that if I'm elected, I will be the first Black person, but I know I will be the first Black woman in this role. And so, I'm excited about the opportunity, and I'm tilling, no matter what, the soil is being tilled, because there are people in my district who have been completely ignored and neglected for almost, over 30 years. And so I am doing the work to engage people who otherwise would not and have not been engaged. And more than anything, I'm just passionate about people getting involved in politics beyond voting. So no matter what happens with this race, like, that is my heart's call, is that people would be involved in politics beyond voting. And I'm gonna do everything I can from now until I leave this earth to help people get involved in politics beyond voting, because these processes matter. And being able to run matters, and to being able to support people to get through the process through voting and volunteering and donating, that matters. And so there's some work to be done on the civic engagement end, but that's where my heart is. And I agree with Ebony as well. We just need more people who care about people, who care about the service part of public service. So that's why I'm here, and I'm showing up, and we're all in. We're snatching this seat 21 days.
Look, come on. Well, we are glad you are running. I'm not going to speak too long because we got about 3-4 minutes left, so I want to keep us to. But also, shameless plug, Black Campaign School, if you haven't been, coming to a city near you in 2021, training the next generation of Black campaigners, candidates, and everything you can think of that's politically Black. Pasha, on to you.
Definitely. I think one of the memories that I have most is my grandfather telling me, if you want to change the game, change the players. And in 2020, this year, we're going to change the players that from the top to every local official, statewide official, county official, soil and water board. We coming for everything, because it's time. One, I started to run for this seat because, one, I'm tired of gerrymandering. And that is happening. It's taking away our power all throughout this country and all throughout the South. A lot of our powers, because we have Blacks are not the minority anymore. We are sometimes the majority. In this district, women are outnumber men voters. And there's never been a woman that has represented them. That to me, government needs to look like the people that it governs. And then government needs to be fair. We see a lot of stuff for the employer. We see billions of aid going to the employer. We see billions going to these corporations. But what happens to the employee? At any level of government, we need to be fair. That's why I always like algebra. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And so those are a few of the reasons I ran, but I also ran so that we can build this bench. And I loved what Matielyn and Ebony and Moe have been saying and what the Collective PAC says and does. We have to build a black bench. There has to be people that come after us. We have to shatter these ceilings now so they don't have it as hard. Because somebody shattered the ceilings for us so that we can sit on Zoom calls at 6 o'clock in the evening with the Collective PAC. Real talk. Real talk. So 1, we got to get rid of gerrymandering. 2, government needs to look like the people that it governs. 3, we got to change the game. So we need to change all the players.
Come on now. Mo, bring us on home.
Absolutely. First off, Pasha, Matielyn, Ebony, y'all are amazing. Thank you for stepping up to serve. Ebony, especially you. I mean, no offense to you other ladies, but to be 25 with a 1-year-old, fresh out of college, stepping up and running for office, that is absolutely amazing and inspiring, and what is needed to show all of us the power that we have as American people. So really big ups to you. That's amazing stuff. But for as me, Barack Obama turned the world of politics on for me as a black male in this country. I was in college, I was a sophomore, and I distinctly remember running through the halls as he was elected to president of the United States. And the feeling for me was that this American dream had opened up. And if he could do it, then I could too. So at that point in time, I got really hooked in politics. I followed it. My job required me to follow it. But I was active, and we had different boards that we was on. We had a young alumni board I served on, but we had a monthly meeting in which we brought the community leaders and business leaders together with the young professionals. And we did that for 3 years, where we'll meet for 2-hour meeting, happy hour, and then 45-minute conversation with that community leader and 15-minute Q&A. So I've always been interested in how we can make communities work better through collaboration of multiple people in the room, looking at all the perspectives of whatever issue that we are facing to find the best solutions. And so that's just been in my DNA, whether that's playing football, being a team captain, whether that's going to commerce and bringing nearly $1 billion of investment, over 5,000 jobs to the state, whether that's being the president of the Association of Lettermen, which was a 6,000 person organization at the age of 27. I've always stepped up when I thought it was time that the leadership was missing. And right now, when Donald Trump's called Ukraine a day after Robert Mueller testified, and he claimed that a witch hunt wasn't that what it was, and did the exact same thing to Ukraine, I felt like he was trying to sun me as an American, as a man. Like, you just gonna break the law that that is a law that you breaking after you called 2.5 years of a witch hunt. And I'm just like, I can't take it. And so what can you do about it, Mo? I'm 32 years old. If I was 3 years older, I would have ran for president. No cap. And the reason why, because I thought that it was so important that people understand what's at stake this cycle around, that our country is literally on the ballot, not just leadership, our country, because the rule of law has been broken, and we have seen our checks and balance system defrauded by the GOP to keep themselves in power and keep their greed and their pockets lined with their money. And so I said, I'm gonna step up and do something about it. And so I ran for Congress, and here we are 21 days away with an opportunity to flip a red district in South Carolina blue and make this state blue as well. So that's why we're doing it, and that's why we're gonna win.
21 days, folks, 21 days. Well, look, this has definitely been one of the most amazing panels that we've done. The way that y'all fed off each other's energy, complimented and took notes all at the same time. I think we can say the future is quite bright for the South, and y'all definitely came with a lot to say tonight. So if you had any takeaways from tonight, it's 1, representation does matter. 2, get out to vote, whether or not it's early voting, you're still mailing in the ballot, or you're showing up on election day. We have too much at stake in this election not to show up this year. 3, Black women always lead, and 4, Black men definitely stand up when it's time to stand up and take charge. So I want to thank everybody for joining the Collective PAC. Again, this was our 9th event. We'll be back on Friday for our 10th event in our Collective Power virtual speaker series, where we'll have a couple of more congressional candidates with us. But until then, continue to build Black political power. You can find out these amazing candidates and make sure you go and donate to them if you visit collectivepac.org and go visit our candidate page. But until then, thank you, and let's make sure we vote. Bye, everybody.